It's time for another episode of Fish Tales. Thanks for coming along with me. Today, very special guest, someone that I've known for almost 20 years. Mr. Greg Marlow is here with us today to talk about his passion, his computer animation, talk about his work in the video game industry, what he's doing now as he's teaching at East Tennessee State, and a little bit about some creative storytelling. Greg, please introduce yourself.
Okay, you said another episode. I'm not the first. Now I'm curious. I should have asked more questions. Yeah, I'm Greg Marlow. I don't know what title to put on myself because I have a couple. I am an animator. I'm also an assistant professor, and as of recently, a graduate coordinator. So, I guess a little about me. I when I was in grad school. That's when I met Lee. I was in the digital media program at East Tennessee State. After I graduated as a Master's of Science from there, I went on and got hired at Firaxis Games. I was doing some workshops and animation online. I got hired at Firaxis Games, and I worked in-house there on the Civilization franchise, XCOM franchise, a couple of different games, several games that will never come out. Got a chance to work on a couple of, I always claim BioShock Infinite, even though I only got to work on it for like 4 days. And so I worked in-house there for about 5 years in Maryland. Came back to Tennessee in 2013 as a lecturer at the same place I graduated from, where I met Lee, East Tennessee State. About 2018, I got my MFA in writing and became an assistant professor at ETSU. And all this time since I've been back, I've also been doing some freelance animation work. Worked on Battleborn, which was sort of killed by Overwatch, and I got to work most recently, well, not most recently, but one of the more fun accomplishments, I worked on The Pathless, which was my first launch title for a console. So it was one of the PS5 launch titles.
Say that again. I've not heard of this. And what is this?
The Pathless.
The Pathless. So, okay.
Yeah, it's fun. It's I guess platformer action adventure. You play this character called the Hunter, and you can play as her and her eagle kind of at the same time. And it's just so much. It's so, I don't know. You should try it out. It's basically like, it feels good to play because you can run really, really, really fast and jump and like glide forever. And so it's just this really like gratifying gameplay experience. I didn't do any of that. I animated the boss battles and a lot of that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Okay, all right. You threw all kinds of stuff out
there.
There
podcast is over, right?
There is an onion. Well, no, there is an onion to peel here. So let's start peeling this onion. Okay, so let's go back, because you threw out the history too, which is good.
Onion is how people often describe me. So,
so I'm sure they do. Greg, the Onion Marlow. It's perfect. So
nothing to do with smell.
Your words. For the people that can't see this podcast is being recorded remotely. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back for just a second. Okay. So we're both at East Tennessee State. You're in the grad program, and then we both ended up in the DC area. You were over in Maryland.
Oh yeah.
And I was in Virginia, and I don't remember how we I don't know. I was on Facebook at the time. I'm not on Facebook anymore, but yeah, I found out, Greg Marlow is up here, but I did not know what Firaxis was. Like, I don't remember. You were like, I work for Firaxis. I'm like, what is that? All right. So let's just start right there. Okay. So personal history is we're both in the DC area, and this is 2009, I guess, or 2010 at this point. And so I remember I got a tour of the studio, which thank you for that. I remember coming over and hanging out with you and your wife. But so tell everybody. So who is Firaxis? What's Firaxis? What do they do?
Okay. So I think when you're looking at the sort of the history of gaming, there are all of these different game hubs all across the U.S. And Firaxis is part of the Baltimore, DC area game hub. So I actually really think it's fun to watch how that came about, because Microprose, way back in the day, used to be in the Baltimore area. And when Microprose closed down, all of these different people from there sort of started their own studios. So Firaxis was started by, well, I guess really their claim to fame is Sid Meier. He's the one who does the Civilization franchise. One of the few people who gets to put his name on the game. So it was started by him and a couple of other people. By the time I got there, Sid was really the only one of I think the founding members who were still there. So the really turn-based strategy is kind of what they're well known for. So the Civilization, they did Railroads, they did XCOM is kind of one of Sid's babies from Microprose that they brought back out. And so they're making all the Civilization games and the spinoffs and not spinoffs, the DLCs and the expansions and stuff. Most recently, the thing that's probably coming out next and has been announced is Marvel's Midnight Sun, which is kind of a card-based Marvel game that also has a lot of elements of XCOM, which is a little bit more of a cover-based, turn-based strategy. And so, and I got to work a little bit on that too. None of the stuff I've worked on has been released on that, so I can't really show much of that. So yeah, they're kind of known for that. Baltimore is interesting. It's also or that area is interesting. It's also where Bethesda and ZeniMax is. And it's always it's like so unassuming. Like it's like all of these studios just surrounding a Wegmans and nobody really knew they were there.
Right.
Like I would go to the barber and they'd be like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I work in video games." And there's video game studios here? I'm like, "Yeah, see that big sign up on the hill that says ZeniMax?" Like, yeah.
Well, if you don't know, to be fair, ZeniMax is kind of an obscure name. If you don't know the history, if you don't know that they've been around and publishing for so long, but yeah.
It totally sounds like something pharmaceutical. ZeniMax. Take twice daily. So.
I think, and there is something to this, like this sort of, game studios that are in suburbia in a way. Mm-hmm. I mean, id was down outside Dallas, I think it was. They were in Texas and kind of unassuming.
Well, I think sometimes, like, especially those big ones, like Firaxis was just like, it was there because that's where Sid wanted to live, and you can't have that studio without him. Like, it's like, and it's like he already had a house there. This is where we're going to put the studio. And I think that a lot of places are like that when they, sort of have roots, like those older studios that are kind of rooted in like some of those classic game makers. Like who is it? I shouldn't bring him up if I can't remember his name, but the guy who, I think he was like one of the programmers for Doom and Quake and all of those. Like he pretty much just started his own studio to make more games like that not too long ago. So
yeah, John Romero.
Yeah, Romero. That's the guy's name. Yeah. So I think they get that leverage to be like, yes, this studio is going to be in.
In my mind, as you were saying that, I was finishing that sentence a different way. When you were thinking of like studios that are built around where someone lives, I was thinking about the creators of Myst and Cyan Studios, I think is who they are.
So, yeah.
Is it Cyan or Cayenne, like the pepper? I don't know. I think it's Cyan. I don't know.
I'm not thinking Sierra. What is Sierra?
No, Sierra published it, but Cyan, Cyan, Cyan did, and I feel like their studio now for sure is around where they live, and it's kind of out in the woods. And there's an audiobook, or there's a book, and I listened to the audiobook around some history of games, and they talked about some of that in there. It was really good. All right, so you're at Firaxis, you're working on. I know for a fact you did work on Civ 5. Was that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so that's a AAA title, yes? I mean, that's a big known brand.
I've been doing this for 15 years and I'm still not 100% sure what AAA means exactly. Like some people would tie that to budget. Civ is it's a flagship title for sure, but like just sort of the way I always looked at it is Civ is a known quantity, right? Like that no matter what, so many people are going to buy it. Right. And so it was a very stable product. And so, even when they would shake it up and they would like, it always, every time a new Civ comes out, the fans are all upset about something. And then like 6 months later, it's the best Civ ever, but you get, there's a life cycle of it. You could be like Civ 4 was released or Civ 5 was released, and they're like, "This is garbage. Civ 4 was the best." And then Civ 6 is released, and they're like, "This is garbage. Civ 5 was the best." So, repeat forever. So it's very, it was a very stable title. Like we knew for sure it was going to sell, 4 to 6 million within the first few years. And so it's, the studio's always, doing something Civ based. And then there's also a little bit of experimenting going around, and it's actually a really cool place to work because Sid was there, and Sid was just kind of this resident genius. Like even when he wasn't working on a game, he was either mentoring somebody or like you would get these weird emails on Monday, and Sid would be like, "Hey, I came in on Sunday and made a game if anybody wants to play it." And he would just send out an email.
Awesome.
And it would be this like Frankenstein of like assets he had cobbled together. And he just was trying to see if it was fun or not. And so like I think he was just it was just a cool, like there was a lot of people who leave that studio and go on to be designers at other studios. It's almost like a training school for how to be a designer. So
that's pretty awesome. And like designing by doing and experimenting, I think that's the best way to learn. I think that's the best way to prove out an idea. Silicon Valley and the startup culture would tell you ship, and figure it out.
Oh no, he would start and abandon so many ideas. And like the studio, I mean, like I have the titles I can say I shipped, but for every one of those, there's like 0.6 titles that just never got made. Like,
nice.
We messed around with them for a while, and they weren't working out. And,
So you're at Firaxis. You contributed to the flagship product, and you were an animator. And I remember seeing your demo reel, and I can't remember the character, if it was like a horseman or something. I felt like he had a staff. I don't know. Maybe I made that up in my head, but tell people like what were you animating? So because Civ, I've honestly, and this is embarrassment. I'm not a real gamer anyways. I've never actually played Civ. I've watched people, and I understand what it's about. So like, what were you animating in Civ?
So Civ has two different sets of animated, things, I guess. And it's kind of like there's two different levels to the game, right? There's the tactical level, or the gameplay level, when you're looking at that giant map, moving units around. And there's a lot of little things that are animated on there. So it's like, you're moving, like if it was a little guy on a horse, it was probably like I don't remember if it was like the Lance Connect or something like there's all these different units. And so I did some of those, but those were, once you animate one tiny horse running, like you're not starting over from scratch. You're kind of using that as a base and doing the next one. So I did some of those early on, but most of what I did was the leader animations. So that's for the diplomacy part of the game, where you're making deals, where you're making trades, right? Where you're declaring war on people, or having them declare war on you, or just being like, "Hey, I'll trade you this much of this for like some sort of diplomacy." So I would do an animation set that was, I guess, kind of half cinematic, half interactive, where you would, propose to Napoleon like some sort of trade deal, and he would either say yes or no, or I'm going to kill you, or whatever. And so most of what I did was those leader sets for those. If you're counting, I've never actually counted them up, but I know that I was there through the base game and through all of the DLCs. And I think I did more leader characters for the Civ 5 franchise than any other animator. So I'm the reason everybody hates Gandhi. No, I'm not really I did Gandhi, I did Napoleon, Genghis, whole bunch of different characters in that. So, and then I got to work a little bit on Civ 6 after I was back at ETSU too. But that was more as a freelance artist. So.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, so I want to button up one thing here, and then we'll talk about you getting back to ETSU. Okay. So you just said there's cutscenes and interactive animations. So what's the difference? I know what a cutscene is, but I don't know what you mean. So what's the difference? What's a cutscene animation, and then what's an interactive animation?
I feel like I'm being a jerk. Interactive, you can interact with it. So these weren't truly interactive, and I couldn't like make him wave his hand or something, like while playing it. But it would be like, I could decide the moment to make a proposition, and it would trigger a new animation. So if you think of even other games like Skyrim or something like that, where you're having a conversation with somebody, and they just kind of sit there and idle until you click the button to say something else, and then they'll respond, and then they'll sit there and idle. Like that's somewhat interactive. Full like interactive is I hit the forward button on my the W key or whatever, and my character moves in real time to that. And then cutscene is really just like a movie. Like a and I sort of have a tendency to use cinematic and cutscene kind of interchangeably, but they are slightly different. Um, but really, that's just a kind of like a passive moment where you can't really control any of it. And then there's varying degrees of that as well. Like there's, I always think of like the God of War games where it's like the battles are, the boss battles are really just like kind of a cinematic that asks you to click a button at the right time. And it's like, so there's varying degrees of how interactive it is. Civ 6, I think, made the diplomacy stuff a little more interactive, and where you can interact with stuff. But like there was like subtle things in the Civ 5 as well. So like the environments were not just map paintings. Like they weren't just like an image behind the character. They were projected onto geometry. So, there would be camera moves, and like there was a little bit of like randomness to that scenario. So it's all, yeah, it's all running off of the graphics card at that point too. It's not like pre-recorded. It's having to render in real time. So
that's what I wanted to clarify. Yeah. Okay. So it's not a video. It's animation. It is a canned animation sequence of some kind, but the engine is playing that. So the camera's fixed. I'm not, as the player, I'm not controlling the camera at this point during a cinematic. The camera is on some kind of scripted, potentially somewhat scripted, maybe procedurally scripted path. And then this animation that you've created is being replayed in the engine, but it's all happening in the engine real time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. There's a lot of, as we get like further into this and like GPUs are getting more powerful and, Unreal and everything, like it is the crossover between those two are starting to get really interesting. A lot of people who are using game technology to create passive media. Passive isn't the right linear media. Passive sounds like I'm insulting it somehow. It's like a bunch of lazy media.
Well, I passing on you. Passive. You don't do anything. Yeah.
No, but people are rendering full series out of. I want to say that I'm not gonna say that just in case. There are certain animated series that are completely rendered inside of a video game engine. And I know every time this comes up, somebody brings up The Mandalorian, how like the Mandalorian backgrounds are sort of real time generated inside of Unreal and then projected on, or not projected, like there's these giant LED screens that the actors are in front of. So there's a lot of crossover starting to happen where people realize sort of the benefit of being able to change something in real time and see immediate results. And I think games have kind of been doing that for a while. But film, TV, and stuff like that is starting. Even visual effects are starting to take advantage of that as well. So
let's move chronologically because this is how we ended up doing it. So let's go. Let's do some chronological here. So you're at Firaxis. You're working on games. You're working on the flagship title. They didn't put you in the corner working on something that's not going to see the light of day. You're working on flagship product stuff, and somehow you get a call. Hey, do you want to come back to ETSU? Do you want to come back and help us? Something happened there. So how did you get back to ETSU?
That one's an interesting one. So, so what happened, is I guess I had like I want to say an early midlife crisis. I had this point in my career that I guess as a student, as a whatever, as you're pursuing your career, right? I'm going to back up just a little bit to tell this part. As you're pursuing your career, like you feel like I am unhappy because I've not accomplished this thing I want to accomplish, and as soon as I accomplish it, then I'll be happy, and I will have now everything will fall into place. And like I always tell the story of when we shipped Civ 6, or I'm sorry, Civ 5, I it came out. And I still went to work that day. I think at least my wife did. And like that day, she came home. She's like, "Let's go out to the store and get a copy." But it's a PC game, so like it's not really a GameStop. So we went to Walmart, and like there it is on the shelf. I'm like, there it is. We've been working for like 4 years on this thing, and I didn't have like camera phones. I had a flip phone. I probably took a picture of that. And, I got a copy of it. And then I was like, all right, I guess we should probably get some milk while we're here too. It was not this like fireworks moment of like, I have, finally made it. And now like it was still like every day. Like, I think that's the moment I realized this is a career, right? And my career has to have a trajectory. So I'd actually interviewed with some other places just to see, like we mentioned ZeniMax. I interviewed with ZeniMax Online. They actually offered me a position. This was before Elder Scrolls Online came out. But I was still enjoying Firaxis. Firaxis is a great company. Really the deciding factor for me, or the thing that made me sort of start questioning what I wanted to do with my career, is they kind of gave me a promotion. And it was a kind of scary promotion. I was basically the animation lead for Civ 6. And I was like, oh, so when we ship this and Game Informer wants an interview, they're going to call me. And like, I was okay with that. Like I was fine with that, but it made me realize like, well, then what? Like what comes next? And we were living in Maryland. Me and my wife are both very close to our family. And I kind of had to make this decision. I'm like, one career trajectory is going to continue to take me further and further away from them. And that is one life that I could live. Or I could try to find some way to get back closer to family, live maybe a slightly different life. But at that time, that's when I saw the position pop up for lecturer at ETSU. And I'm sure that anybody listening right now who's like dreamed to work in games is like, wait, you quit a good job in the game industry to go like be a teacher, not even a professor, just like a lecturer to like, but it was a moment that I just had to make that decision. I was like, where do I want my life to lead? And essentially I wanted it to be closer to my family. I wanted to, I didn't want to feel like I was just dragging my wife all over the country just so I could try to, get another shipped title.
And so to add context, your family is in East Tennessee. Your family is close to East Tennessee State.
Yeah, my wife's family is right here. Like they're 15 not 15 minutes. Like walking distance from the closet where I currently sit recording. The closet had to come up eventually.
Yeah,
and that's like maybe like 15 minutes from ETSU where I'm at. My family is probably closer to about 2 hours from here, but it's still, I went and saw them this weekend. So yeah, it was like, I knew that this was one of the few opportunities that would get me back closer to that. And when I did it, it was kind of like, I thought it was going to be more disruptive to my life goals than it actually was. I was like, I guess I'm giving up on the career of animation, and now I will sacrifice myself to the betterment of the next generation of animators. But no, it was like within like 6 months, I think Firaxis called and asked if I wanted to do some contract work, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. And so that's actually kind of the best of both. I will say that the lecturer position was not a prestigious job. Like that is
sure.
that is just a step over like unemployed. Like they're basically like, you're going to teach 4 classes and there's not a lot of benefits to it financially or anything.
Were you
But
adjunct at that point? Are you an adjunct lecturer?
it's basically the next step from adjunct.
Okay.
It's a full time adjunct, but it's paid about the same as adjunct per class, and so it was a pay cut. Like, I mean, just like every step of it on paper sounded like a bad idea. But it was moving back to Tennessee. The pay cut wasn't that bad because the cost of living difference at the time was more significant than it is now. And eventually, like, I knew that there was a pathway for me. Well, not for everybody, but I knew that I could make a pathway to whatever the next professor position was. And I'm like, all right, I'll play the long game. And so I came back, started walking the walk of a professor. I was like, I know I'm, a lecturer teaches 4 classes and they don't have any like real service or well, at least no research requirement. Like, I didn't have to publish or do anything like that. But I just started doing it anyway. I started publishing, started like, doing things. And then I was also doing the contract work at the same time. So the last missing piece was I had a master's of science. So anybody who's not familiar with academia, there's this concept of a terminal degree. It's like the highest degree you can get in a pathway. And for most pathways, that's a PhD. But for the arts, an MFA is a terminal degree. Well, since there's a higher degree than a master's of science, which is what I had, it wasn't terminal. And most places who are hiring a professor want a terminal degree. And I was like, I don't really want to do another degree in animation. I had a bachelor's, I had a master's. I went to an online school for a little while, got a certificate. I'm like, I'm going to do something else that I just enjoy. So I started at Lindenwood. They had an online program, Lindenwood University in Missouri. I had an online program for writing. And I was like, I want to write stories about time machines and robots and get an MFA for it. And so I did.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had a conversation at one point. I was like, because you had told me that you were doing this writing stuff. And I'm like, oh, like, you like writing. I don't remember when we talked about this, but I remember having conversations with you. You're like, yeah, I love creative writing. And I don't know. I just think it's fascinating because you're like a creative powerhouse and you're very talented. Like, you're good at everything that you do. You're good at the writing and you're good at the animation. So a part of this, like, where I'm certainly like, Greg, I am jealous. Like, I can't tap into creativity anymore. It's a brick wall for me. That's the challenge for me right now in my life. I don't remember how to be creative. I don't know. I hit this wall. It's just blank. It's just empty space. There's nothing there. I can't move through it. It's like a force field. And you can write and you can animate and you have these ideas. And the thing that I noticed is even talking to you, people can't see you. They can't see you smiling and they can't see you getting excited talking about this stuff and talking about these other games, and this creative, the creative expression that you get. And really what all of this is like, entertainment arts, where there is so much around, entertainment and it's educational too. But yeah, I am jealous. There's so much creativity. So when did you figure out this? You're like, yeah, you touched on it. You're like, yeah, I want this master's in writing. I want to write about robots and stuff. So when did you start writing?
Like when I was 7 years old.
7? Yeah.
When I don't, maybe a little older than that. I want to say for my 10th birthday, I asked for an electric typewriter. And it was like a Smith Corona. Like, like I feel so old even talking about it. At least it wasn't like those old, like, clackety clacks. It was like but I was really into it. When I was in 5th grade, I started writing, a short story. It was like 5th grade. It was like 1 page, right? It's called The Phantom. But I misspelled Phantom. Like, I thought that was like, I don't remember how I spelled it, but because I still don't remember how to spell it correctly. And there's like 1 page, and it was like this, like, it was like a horror story. I was really into Stephen King at the time, and then
in 5th grade, you're really into Stephen King.
I jumped straight from Beverly Cleary to Stepin King. No joke.
Perfect.
I really did. I was like, this Ramona book's great. I'm gonna read it. So I was reading like a lot of this horror stories and stuff, and so I tried writing my own, and it was terrible. It was like this like serial killer like kid, but he dies at the end of the first page, and then I was like, I want to keep writing more. So like he gets resurrected and he's a zombie. Like I was up to like 20 pages, like handwritten pages of this like terrible story, like a Ninja Turtle spinoff came into it. But I think a lot of it came from my mom likes to read a lot, and I think she kind of passed that on to me. Sort of the interest of it, and I think it's all kind of, you mentioned all the creative stuff. It really is just it all kind of circles back to that. Like I like a good story, and how that story gets made is, I mean, there's the narratives that you play through in games. Like I just finished playing the Spider-Man games, and that story is just amazing. It's great. Like the Spider-Man game is probably the best Spider-Man movie out there.
Okay, that's good to know. I've not played any of. I don't have a PlayStation, and I know it's coming to PC, so maybe it's already on PC.
I really liked Miles' story, but I'm kind of the Miles Morales one. But I'm also kind of a Miles fanboy too. It's like games are a story, even if it's not got a predefined story. You're still playing it, so you can. They call it like the Ludo narrative. Like you're telling a story to yourself. Like I invaded Poland, and then
Okay.
But movies are stories. I love TV, and like I think it all just kind of everything that you're saying is creative, I think circles back to some sort of story. Like I was in a band in college, and like still like just kind of write songs for fun, but they're all like sort of story based songs, like
ballads.
Like, yeah, I'm writing like these ballads on my lute, and
I love it.
But like I think it's all that to me. I just love the idea, and I think that's what it came down to. The crazy thing is, I don't think I'm actually a great verbal storyteller. My wife is always picking on me because I'll be like halfway through a story and she'll be like, "What are you even talking about?" And I'm like, "Oh, I forgot to mention this really important part at the beginning." Yeah, but I think it all, like, I just enjoy a story, and sometimes when that, like, I'll just have an idea and I'll be like, "Nobody's wrote that story. I guess I have to," and so that's I think where it all kind of comes from.
That's interesting. So there's a turn of phrase. I have another friend that we talk about this all the time. This turn of phrase I learned it like 3 years ago. This is something I grew up hearing, but I heard this phrase and he just read it in a book and he sent me a screenshot of the book. He's like, "Oh, here it is." The turn of phrase, or maybe it's a colloquialism. I don't know what you call these things. It's horses for courses. Have you ever heard this?
Horses for, I feel like I have, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
That seems familiar.
Horses for courses. That there are horses for each type of course that you would run a horse on. So there are horses for courses. And I don't know, just what you were talking about. That's what came to my mind, horses for courses, because you're talking about all the storytelling stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's it, though. That's it. That's why I can't do this. And I'm so attracted to the technical side of things. I'm so attracted to the analytical side. I'm attracted to the look of things way more than the like story behind them. Like I have so much fun playing that. There is a tech demo from Epic Games that is their Matrix, the nanite technology tech demo. Yeah. And I will play that for hours. It's embarrassing. I will play that for hours. And there's nothing you can do in there. You fly around and turn it from daylight to nighttime and drive a car. And Microsoft Flight Simulator just sucks my life away. And there's no story. I mean, like, to your thing, and I'd never heard that either. What did you say it was? Ludo? What was it?
The Ludo narrative.
Ludo narrative.
A lot of people call it emergent narrative too. Like it emerges from gameplay. But yeah.
So there's not much of an emergent narrative to me playing these landing challenges, and
except for when you crash. Well, it's got a big story there.
But yeah, so I've always liked the technical side. I mean, even when we were in school, so I'm around all these people that can animate and model and create this stuff, and all I wanted to do was render it. Like, give me your stuff and I'll render it, and then. If I'm rendering it, like I will, I don't remember if you were there one night or not. I know Chris Bobko was, who's somebody else. I should probably get to talk to me, but
give him a go.
I turned the whole lab into my render farm, and I eventually learned how to turn the whole building into my render farm. It wasn't just the one lab; it was all the labs. But like I don't know, I just love doing that stuff. But I guess it's like I'm even hesitant at this point to say I'm good at it. I'm decent at it. I'm decent at this sort of stuff, but I always look kind of over the fence. I'm like peering over the fence. I'm Wilson. You know, remember from Home Improvement? I'm Wilson. Like you can see my eyes
I,
popping up, and I'm like, "Hey, neighbor,
I
you're doing
do,
some
neighbor.
neat stuff over there." Heidi ho!
Well, so that, but that's, I mean, it's the same from this side of the fence too, though. Like I'm peeking over and being like, "How'd you get that render to look so good?"
And that's, you know, that people talk about like AI taking jobs and stuff. I've been playing with Dolly and all that. I was just
Oh
like
yeah,
tangent, you know, to satisfy me. But like, I want to hear you. I want to know what you think about Dolly because I've been playing with Dolly and it doesn't, and some of the other ones too, like Mid Journey and all
yeah,
that. But I don't think the AI stuff is going to remove artists at all from the
mm-hmm.
equation. But I think there is a certain type of work that is it employs people right now that's not going to employ people in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Concept art potentially.
Yeah,
You know, this like emergent thing. So I want to know, what do you think? Because I went into Dolly and I typed in 3D render white glasses on a blue background with white lace, and it actually gave me a pretty good render. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. Like, and I didn't have to open 3D Studio Max or Maya or Houdini or whatever, Blender. I didn't have to open anything. I didn't have to render anything, and it looks like that. Now it gets wonky because like it does the AI thing, or it makes this weird stuff that's kind of like in a dream.
mm-hmm.
But I don't know. There's like something there, and so there's a part of me that thinks like this lighting and rendering parts of things. I think there's analysis. Like you can train these models. Like it's all these models, deep learning models that generate this stuff, and I think you could train them. This is what a good, you know, like lit scene looks like, and it can just start doing kind of look dev for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's all just pixels, right? Like, I mean, it's like as soon as the computer can make the right pixels, then it wins. I'm in two schools of thought. Like everything, I have way too much to say about it. But so you will remember that when you were at ETSU, you had we had an animator who came to visit, and I will not mention his name, from a studio. And like this was a guy who had won an Academy Award for an animated short film. Came to talk to us and like give us this talk, and I remember like he was giving this presentation, and at the time he was working for a game studio. And I remember like the only thing I remember from this whole thing is like at one point I think it was me or you one asked the question of him at like one of these presentations. We're like, so where do you think? And this was what 2002, I guess, something like that, 2004. I don't know. One of us asked like, so where do you think the animation industry is going to be in 5 years? And he goes, you don't want my answer for that. And I was like, yeah, we do. And he's like, there's not going to be keyframe animators anymore. Motion capture is going to take over everything, and like there won't be any jobs for that ever again. And I was really, and that pretty much just killed the whole presentation. We're all like, all right, well, we're going to go home and rethink our lives.
the mocap doom and gloom. That, I don't know. It kind of came and went. As an outsider, it came and went. I know they still use it heavily, but okay, keep going.
I guess like so. There's the part of me that wants to look at AI in that same way, and I do think that like there's reasons to feel like it can live alongside all other forms of creativity. But AI in general, I'm a little more like that is a paradigm shift. Politics aside, but as Andrew Yang, who was running for president a few years ago, he's the $1,000 guy. That's the one. I read his book, and he is very much like concerned about what automation is going to do to the to repeatable tasks, right?
Right.
And it's not necessarily that it's. I think really it's a big paradigm shift in that like we have to rethink like the model we've built around work, like what work actually is.
Absolutely. The value that you put into human toil. That's right.
Right. And like he has some like it was a brilliant book. Like he like there's other reasons to decide whether to vote for him or not. But it was an amazing book, and he talked a lot about and I keep thinking of that. Like we built this system, right? We built this whole idea of like, oh, we have to work a 40-hour work week or we are not valuable to society. And that work only is beneficial if it's increasing capital for, and I'm like, I feel like that's what it's going to disrupt. It's going to disrupt this idea that the only point of art is to make money for something. And I think that's the same with other automation. I mean, there's still going to have to be systems that are built around making money. But I mean, they're obviously, if there's human beings driving trucks in the next 15 years, then like I'm going to be very surprised. All of those people are going to have to, find things that still give them a reason to be alive, right? And I think that my hope is that we start to invest in things, or I guess invest not in money wise, but invest like our interest, invest our like our feelings of worth in things that aren't just there to make more money, right? Like that the idea that if what you want to do all day long is, help elderly people install Windows 11 on their computer, like, and that gives you a good feeling and like lets you get through life. Like that is something that, like right now, old people can't install Windows 11 on their computers because it's not profitable to build that system. And like, I feel like I'm thinking that that's more of the questions that's going to spiral. I feel like AI art is, I'm impressed with the output. But I think in the same way that Photoshop didn't kill photography, like the same way motion capture didn't kill animation, it will find some way to live with it. I'm terrible at futurism to be able to predict what that will be. But I think that there is a way that it can live. And I think there's a lot of fear surrounding it right now, like particularly from artists, and it may actually impact us for a little while. But I think that, there are things that there's room for both of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like that's my thing with my example with rendering is that there's certain things that look development when you're just experimenting with things. You can shortcut that. You can get an idea on something, you can shortcut it with AI that I don't have to. And even me, if it were me driving the computer, that is me pushing those pixels around, I actually want that assistance. I want that assistance to let me, click one button and see 4 versions of a thing, and it takes minimal effort.
So one of the things that I read, I guess yesterday, which I think is an interesting roadblock I didn't see coming, the group that gives copyright, like distributes copyright, continue to deny copyright to AI artists. So because they say that it requires authorship, like human authorship. And so I think that that's an interesting question, is like at what, and it's actually something I've submitted proposals for this talk. At what point are we willing to consider the human the author of these AI driven systems, right? Because if you look at the prompts that people type in to get these amazing results, there's an art to that.
There is absolutely an art to this prompt. What do you call it? Is it prompt architecting? Is it prompt hacking? I mean,
prompt architect.
There's really something. Are you a prompt astronaut? Because I used to joke, anybody that takes something too far, right? They go to space with it. You're an architect astronaut. You're a type astronaut. So yeah, you're a prompt astronaut. You're in orbit with these prompts. Yes, I have seen the one that won that award. That's it was very controversial. This guy won an art show, but yeah, the prompt was crazy.
Oh, but one of the things that's great about those prompts, because I've been trying some of them. I've been using, I used Dolly and Midjourney for a little while, but I started trying one of the Stable Diffusion builds because somebody put together a nice GUI for it. But when I just typed in like, I want to see a horse, driving a race car or something, like I did not get good results. It was like very repetitive. It looked very computer generated. Anything with grass. The grass just looked like the old clone stamp tool in Photoshop, repeating forever. So like I started looking up how do you make better prompts, and a lot of the results is just using like keywords and tags from stuff like ArtStation or places where you're getting it, and like where you're getting good results is by putting in other artists' names.
Oh gosh.
Like influenced by this artist, and it's like not even like a somebody that you may know. It's just somebody who has a lot of work that's in that database, and it's going to start pulling that and pulling from that specific artist. And I'm like, when your prompt architecture includes another artist's name, do they get credit? do they like, are you going to have to start like citing your work in APA format? Like, there's just a lot of interesting questions.
I love the whole ethics of this. Yeah, I really don't spend
fun.
that much time thinking about the ethics of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's this week's NFT.
Well, so are NFTs mostly just these things? Like, I know what an NFT is for everybody listening. If there is someone at this point, and there's no disgrace in this, if you've not familiar with this, NFT is non-fungible token. And it's this idea that you can have some sort of ownership of a digital asset. It's a receipt. It's a fancy receipt. And they have value. They have real value. Like, if I could track my car title as an NFT, there's some real value to that. I can prove on this ledger, the shared global ledger, that I'm the owner of this asset, this title, this piece of paper that ties it to my car. But people are trading images, and they're buying things like souvenirs. NASCAR. Have you seen this? NASCAR has been pushing NFTs. Tony Stewart riled up some fans by having, and I quote, a major announcement. And it was that he was going to do some NFT stuff. But I know generative art was a big part of that. Are all NFTs generative? I guess they're not all generative, because I could just make something and I could somehow do the NFT. I don't even know how you make an NFT, but
I think the rest of them are stolen.
Is that oh my god, that's stolen. But is that how it got started? I mean, did this AI art, like, what launched us into NFT land? I don't know. I mean,
I don't know if it was that or if it was the other way around. I feel like people were, I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff colliding, because I've been seeing a lot of stuff with AI for other solutions of stuff too. Like, there's an AI motion capture right now called Move.ai. And it's essentially like, you can have like two cameras, and it's getting like you can have it with one camera, but you can have like somewhere between 1 to 5 cameras, and you're getting like motion capture data that's as nice as like a studio. And what it's really doing is it's just using AI to be like, oh, in these scenarios, the feet usually don't come off the ground, so we're going to stick the feet to the ground. I'm sure I'm oversimplifying that.
You may not,
but it's AI generated. Yeah, but it's a lot of it is using like tracking and then combining that with AI to get a really nice solution. Like, it's all over the place. And I don't know. I think that there was a lot of people who were trying to use stuff for the deep fakes and stuff like that, and I think that really started the is it StyleGAN, that really felt to me like the turning point. Was it StyleGAN 2 or whatever? That was like, wow, that's impressive. It all feels kind of derivative from those systems in some way. I don't know behind the scenes of it, but I'm sure that part of the interest in the AI generated art is that it can be used for an NFT later. Unfortunately, I think as it's getting popularity, the NFT bubble is popping. It's just like they're passing each other on the way.
So, ships passing in the night. I want to look something up, because you were talking about StyleGAN. Now, is that NVIDIA's thing? I'm going to Google it while we're talking here.
Yeah, I don't think so. Maybe StyleGAN is basically an AI way of copying an image style, but a lot of that is what is used, because you can do it with any image database, and it'll eventually try to generate images that are alike in certain stylistic ways. And I think a lot of that is what people use for like the deep fakes of faces and stuff. I don't know. I was like ankle deep in like researching some of it for a while, and then I got distracted by Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2.
Well, I'm happy to tell you, as I'm looking here, StyleGAN 3 is out. So you can now use StyleGAN. But yeah, that is from NVIDIA. Yeah. So, and I forget.
Oh, okay.
GAN, GAN, it's a generative adversarial network. I knew I'd like Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I have heard that before. I just did not remember.
So the thing that I like about the NVIDIA style stuff that I've seen, especially with landscapes, is that the human is still involved, right? I'm still sitting down. I'm like, if you've seen the landscape generator, it's like, all right, here's some brown, and that means it's ground. Here's some blue, and that means it's water.
Oh, yeah.
You know, here's some green, that's foliage or grass, whatever. And I think that's neat. I think the idea, you know, that I can rough in something and it can kind of fill in the blank, or it can kind of paint by numbers. I think that's pretty cool. And I don't know. I like the idea that, you know, more of this AI stuff, just broadly the umbrella AI stuff, that it's here to help us. Mm-hmm. And actually, I can tell you, because this idea is not an original idea for me. I was in a room with some machine learning and AI folks from IBM in 2018. And in this meeting, the person said, and I'll look up her name. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but I think she was like CTO of their emerging tech section or their AI section. She did some stuff with Watson. But basically, she said, how did they use the phrasing was like, it's a cognitive enhancement tool that the human is in the loop. It's making the human better. It's not replacing the human. And I really liked that. And I was drinking that Kool-Aid. I liked her sales pitch. I'm taking that for everything wholesale. I'm like, yes, it's here to help us. I'm still in the loop. And so I like the NVIDIA paint the landscape thing.
I do too. I think that's actually, one of the reasons that I'm like, Stable Diffusion doesn't work unless you have a whole bunch of images to base it off of. Like, and so that means like, I think it's with, like that would be my concern about it, is that just means we're in for a decade of the same art over and over again. Like eventually people will get tired of that look, whatever that look is. And the only way to get that is to make a whole bunch of new art. And like, I think that's going to be a turning point. If something could make something completely original in style, that would be, but right now it all has to be derivative from something else. Well, you know, I think it's also like, I mean, I'm already, because I'm following like some threads of people posting their work, and you can, you know, in the same way, like in Photoshop, we were all like in the, you know, late 90s being like, oh no, people will never be able to tell, and we'll be able to Photoshop the president's face on the, we can all tell. Like, you can see something like, that's Photoshopped. Like, I mean, you know, except for the people who are still on Facebook, they can't tell. But I feel like that I'm already seeing that. Like you can look at an AI generated art and just be like, yeah, I can tell for some reason that
sure.
is. And it's not just the artifacting and stuff. Like there's just it's kind of a feel to it.
Well, there's the uncanny valley, right? There's going to be a whole nother uncanny valley here too, I'm sure.
Well, for me, my bigger concern, and maybe it's just because I'm like the situation I'm in, is the teaching side of this. Like, like when somebody can type in a prompt and get something that looks pretty good, like, you know, that's a quick way around a certain assignment, you know.
Well,
and so
you show your work, right? Show your work. Give me the source file. Show your work. Let me have a PSD with layers, right?
Yeah.
Let me have your scene file.
I think it's a Reddit or something that I follow that's shit academics say. And one of my favorites, like if I were going to get a tattoo, it would say that it's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, it's going in the syllabus.
I love it.
And it is so true to like, cause like every time I give an assignment, it's like, oh, apparently I had to say that out loud, that you can't do that. So you'd be surprised.
My one foray with teaching, I can tell you, wow, do kids not know how to push every single boundary? Like they are extremely creative in ways that they can try to push a boundary and get around a rule. Well, that's not exactly what you said. I was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I had students who turned in essentially the same file one semester, and they were first year students. And I emailed them and I was like, what's going on here? And they were like, oh yeah, we collaborated on that project. It's like, wait, I had to say that you have to do your own. Like, that was something I actually had to say out loud. Um, yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, so we took this tangent, which is great because I love tangents, but I do want like to have some closure to things before we run out of time. Because okay, we went down this tangent because you're back at ETSU. I was asked about the creative writing,
Mm-hmm.
so you got your MFA, you got your terminal degree, you got your MFA in writing,
Mm-hmm.
and so what's the status now? Do you have tenure?
I go up for tenure. Crap, I should know this. At the beginning of next fall. So basically, I have this summer to finish everything up, and I've done like some pre-tenure stuff where like we sort of do like a rough pass of what my tenure document would look like at like the halfway point. But yeah, I'll submit for tenure in, I think it's like August of next year. I should probably find out the actual day. But yeah, I'll go up for that, and then that process takes quite a while actually because it has to go all the way up the line and like get reviewed at every step of it. So I think it'll take about half a year at that point.
So what goes in your tenure packet for a creative, instructional position like this? You mentioned research, you mentioned publishing. Are you doing research? Are you publishing? What is, I guess for us, I say us like I'm doing this too, but for you, I guess publishing would be something like to do with SIGGRAPH or an ACM publication, or are there
It
other
can, but
things?
so for us, because like there's teachers in the art department too, and they're not like they don't have to like reinvent a paintbrush to to be. So for anybody in the creative side, and it's nice because I'm in digital media, which is kind of got one foot in tech, one foot in art. And so we get to kind of what the phrase that we usually use is research or creative activity. And so really all that is a like it's a safeguard to say that your peers have reviewed the things that you are doing and they're saying it's not garbage, right? Because I don't want somebody from the biology department telling me if my art is good or not, right? And so like so
Right.
rather than the biology department, reviewing my work and telling me if I deserve to be a teacher or not, I have to go out and get peer reviewed in some way. So that could be a paper, research, a study, anything that would be published or presented in a conference. So there's different levels of that. Published by like double blind peer reviewed in a journal is probably like the highest end of the research. And like, you mentioned SIGGRAPH. Like SIGGRAPH is actually like that's still like that's big. Like that's still like a pretty prestigious thing to get accepted anything into SIGGRAPH. But usually that is a little bit more like I discovered a thing or I created a new thing, not I made a pretty version of the old thing.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, that's why they have like the animation festivals and stuff. So yeah, animation festivals, film festivals would also count as creative activity because those are often there's a jury or a judging process, and so just getting accepted is considered peer review. It was reviewed that it was good enough to get into this exhibition. So yeah, like gallery exhibitions would also count. I'm trying to make an argument that professional work should also weigh into that. I mean, if anything is peer review, it's a boss telling you whether this is good enough to send an invoice for or not. Like, but I totally understand why that's sort of seen as like paid work as well, like that's slightly different. So the interesting thing is usually every department gets to write their own tenure and promotion guidelines and say this is what we value as a department and what we consider applicable tenure material. Every teacher has teaching, research, and service. Those are the trio. Service is the one that like you can have all the service you want. If you don't have the teaching and the research, you're probably still going to get tenured.
What is service? Like, what's an example of service?
Committees, volunteering. So there's different levels of it. There's service to the department, service to the university, service to the community. So I unpaid consulting. I'm putting in. I do some stuff with our church that helps out with the media. For we've been live streaming the services since COVID, and I'm counting that because it is media related as like service to the community. But even like volunteering at like a like a soup kitchen or something like that could count of service. It's a little less. It's usually best if it can also be about your discipline, like if I made something for a nonprofit or something like that. And the teaching is actually more than you think too, because it also is about like developing new curriculum, developing new ways you teach certain things, not just like I showed up and I taught and I didn't get terrible SAIs.
Oh boy, those student reviews, they crucified me.
I've had some interesting ones. I had one year, like I was reading the comments and I was like, I don't understand what's happening in this comment. And then I went a little bit further down and I read another comment, and it's like these giant blocks of text. And eventually I realized they had just copied and pasted a whole chapter of 50 Shades of Grey into the comments section. And I was like, I don't know if I should take this as a positive or negative feedback. Yeah, students are interesting.
Yeah, the department that I taught in, the students received a participation grade for filling out their reviews. And that was a standard like thing. And so it was, students had to participate in class to get part of their grade, and they had to fill out the review as part of the participation. And that made sure there was no funny business. Everybody was getting the reviews in. And yeah, boy, it was bad. And it was the first time I'd ever taught anything, to come into a class like that. And unfortunately, it was just horrible timing for all parties involved. The students, they had some, and I think for 3 classes in a row in this kind of web tech area, they had adjunct instructors. And one of the adjuncts had no supervision through most of the course, and they taught them Dreamweaver. And this was in 2018.
Dude, I didn't know Dreamweaver was still
so they taught them right. So they taught them Dreamweaver, and they didn't so they show up into this class, a 500 level class. Okay. So I have all the excuses in the book. I can defend myself. It was a 500 level class. They saw the syllabus, and we get into like 3rd week of the syllabus, and they can't do the work. And they're mad at me. I mean, it's fine to be mad at me over the situation, but you can't be mad at me. I didn't teach your other classes. I can't, I was told to prepare a class one way, and that there was this baseline of what these kids would know. But yeah, they roasted me. And it was interesting reading what they had to say about me, because they were like, Lee's the type of person I would love to get a beer with. This is in the same review. Okay. They say this under one thing. Lee is the type of person I like to get a beer with. Then like the next question or 2 questions down, it's like, Lee's the worst instructor I've ever had. I was like, I can totally believe that. I can 100% believe that, because it just went off the rails by like the 4th week. We had to leave the parts of the syllabus behind, and we had to do remedial stuff to try to get them up to what they should know going out into the careers they were going to have. So, oh man, it was rough.
Before I came to ETSU, I taught at, I'll not name the school, but it was one of the for-profit art schools out there that is a chain. And I didn't know anything about it. They called me out of the blue while I was working at Firaxis, and they're like, hey, we need somebody to teach this class, and we saw that you have a master's degree. Would you want to, drive up here and teach every, 1 class a week? And I was like, sure, I'll try it. And, I'd already taught as an adjunct at ETSU a little bit before that, but I got up there, and it was the graduating seniors, and it was essentially supposed to be like 3D art level 4. And in the syllabus of 3D art level 4, they were going to learn like some of the effects stuff, and it by name mentioned stuff in Maya. So it had to be taught in Maya. But 3D art level 1, 2, and 3, the teacher didn't know Maya. So he taught it in something else. And I think it was 3D Studio Max. And so I showed up and I was like, what? And so it was like, I have never, they were good students. They worked really hard and they tried really hard, but they absolutely hated that school. Like they were so like, and so that was my last interaction with that school too. It's like, yeah.
I felt bad. I felt genuinely bad for the students. Like I said, I had some stuff going on too. So, it was hard being present. And I know I wasn't in the best place that I could be, because I wasn't, able to I wasn't a full-time faculty member. I couldn't put that amount of work into things. I showed up for my office hours. I had students show up for office hours, just like every teacher anywhere will tell you. The students that do the best in my class are the ones that come to office hours. It's so true. It's not a favoritism thing or anything, you know, nothing like that. They come, they ask questions, they fix their deficiencies, and they do well in the class.
Oh, the ones who do poorly will show up to your office hours that last week of class.
Yeah. When they ready to phone in, that was in one of our reviews too. I had a lot of seniors in my class, and up front in the syllabus, that's all the thing I love about the syllabus is I was like, folks, you knew what you were getting into when you took the class. The syllabus is published and it explains how their grade is calculated. And 40% of their grade was their final project. Yeah. So you gotta do good on your final project. We don't have a final exam. We have a project. You got to do good on it. And so they're roasting me in the reviews. Like, here I am, a senior, not knowing if I can graduate because I have to have a C to graduate. And I don't even know what my grade's going to be. It's like, well, fact. Yes, you don't know what your grade is going to be till you do this work. But I don't know. They were making this way bigger than it had to be in their head. They were just, I mean, I get it. I remember being a student. They were stressing about the wrong stuff.
Well, did it sour you on being a teacher? Would you ever teach again?
It didn't sour me on it at all. No way. What it made me realize is that I'm just not, I don't think I'm very good at it. I think I could be good at it, but it would take a lot of work. And I love the presenting. I love the lecturing. I love the demoing. I love all of that. The breaking a concept down, trying to figure out what makes it click for one individual versus another individual, that is tough. That's really, really tough.
Yeah. It's hard. I think that was my surprise. Like, this is the thing that I think was the biggest surprise to me coming back to teaching. I mean, I taught as a grad student, but the biggest surprise to me coming back to teaching is that it wasn't a classroom full of me. It was like a classroom is very diverse in like personalities and interest levels. And I think once you've been out in the professional industry for a while, like, you surround yourself with competence, right? Everybody is so good at what they do. I remember the first like art meeting I went to for Axis. Like, I was used to create critiques from college where you tear somebody apart and I was just like, oh, this is so good. Like, I was just so blown away. And, eventually there are things you critique, but everybody there knows what they're doing because they were the person in class who was like the best in their class or one of the best in their classes. And then you get back to teaching and you realize that only maybe 10 or 15% of the class is that person, right? The people who are there and attentive and excited about learning the thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the rest of them are this semester has been, these last few semesters, I have students who, well, it was like last semester, I had 2 students who would come into my class. It was a small class of like 7 people. And they would sit there and look at their phone with earbuds in while I was lecturing. And like, I called them out on it like that next semester. I was like, if you're going to do that, just don't show up to my class. And they were like, I have focus issues. And like, this helps me like to kind of, and I was like, okay, whatever. I guess, like, I think eventually like you kind of, that's the hard part. If you were just going and teaching to a class full of people who were excited and working, like, it would be the best job in the world. It's that you also feel like you have to drag this one kid along who's like, dad made him be there. And like, it's interesting. Like, and I think the other thing I forget at least is that, I learned everything I know by screwing it up once, and they haven't had the chance to screw it up yet. And it's really hard for me to not be like, no, don't do that. Do it this way. Cause it'll, I'm like, no, go ahead and break it. It's broken. Now you'll know not to do it that way anymore. That's called learning.
Well, there's something too, right? It's like a reinforcement learning, and you experience it, and you remember it because you experience it. It's a big thing I have noticed about myself looking back, and I figure out like, how do I learn? And like, now I know, like, I really have to do something for it to stick. Mm-hmm. I can understand a lot of concepts, talking about them. And it's like, this my analogy or metaphor. I always say these the wrong way because it's a metaphor that I give people. It's like physics homework. I remember being in physics class in college at East Tennessee State, And I remember watching this instructor draw a parabola. You know, it's like, oh, this is a rock, and he draws the arc on the board, and he talks about the equations, and he just, I was like, yeah, oh, so, of course, yeah. You know, and I don't remember what the equation were. You know, it wasn't as simple as like, you know, force equals mass times acceleration. It's like, yeah, got it, piece of cake. And then you go home hours later, and you go to do the homework, and you're like, oh, I don't understand any of this. And I think that's the difference, right? You can nod along with stuff and think you got it. Then you go home, and so you're in physics class listening to someone that knows what they're talking about explain it. And you're like, yes, I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense, and I agree. Yes. Then you go home, and you realize, okay, I don't have this ability to independently execute. How do you close that gap?
Oh, I don't know.
That's the learning, right? That's closing that gap. That is the learning.
So the one for me is the graph editor. For animators, they fight with the graph editor so much. And for those of you who don't really know that, it's basically just a bunch of curves that define the XYZ coordinates of stuff. And its motion is just, you know, changing a value over time in those XYZ coordinates. And it ends up with this like really messy graph. But to refine the animation, you have to go in there and like manipulate that graph to get little tiny details in it. And like, I will sit there and, you know, explain the graph editor. I'll ask them questions about it. They can answer the questions. And then I'll hand them a piece and I'll be like, all right, now animate this. And they'll just like stare at the graph editor and be like, wait, what do I do here? Like, you can understand it in concept. You do have to have your hands on it. And you have to screw it up and then do it again and then screw it up and then do it again. And eventually, like we're just this giant reservoir, you know, ingrained memories of how to not screw up that thing we've screwed up before.
I remember this. This looks similar to the last time this put me in pain. It caused me pain. I remember this pain.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're about out of time. So we talked about a lot of stuff. We kind of chronologically went through things. And so you're chasing down tenure and you're happy with your decision. I know you are.
I am. Yeah.
So what's next? What's next? Just the tenure and then just whatever.
Well, so I will, this isn't necessarily a plug, but over the last month, some stuff has changed for me. So I'm still doing some freelance work. I want to keep doing freelance work. I'd like to sort of branch out a little bit out of the game industry and try some stuff, but that's going to take a little bit of reworking my demo reel a bit. But at the beginning of the semester, I got the opportunity to take over as the graduate coordinator. So when I went to ETSU, we had a Master's of Science program, which wasn't a terminal program. Over the last year or so, we've implemented an MFA program, which is a terminal degree. And I'm sure Lee will remember, like when I was there, like most of my days was just spent complaining about the fact that it wasn't an MFA. And so now that it is an MFA, like I kind of feel invested in like, I got to make sure this thing is successful. So I took over the grad coordinator for that. And that's going to take a reasonable chunk of time, but it's extremely fun time. You know, like I mentioned that, like, you know, those high performing students in your classroom, like an MFA program is just those students, and they are doing some incredible stuff. You know, like with an NFL team, one person, I'm not going to say their name, they actually just got an internship with Epic. So like, just some amazing stuff happening, and it's really cool to get to work with them and like, you know, see the students who are like, all of them are trying really hard and doing really cool stuff. But then there's a lot of elements to that I've not dealt with before. I got to do advising. I got to tell them which classes to take next. And I'm like, I don't know.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I got to start. Dude, I get so many spreadsheets in my life. There's so many spreadsheets. So yeah, it's got a lot of that. And I think that's going to eat into a little bit of my ability to do freelance work. At least for a couple more weeks here or months here. But I'm hoping to maybe start branching out and doing a couple new projects before long. You know, and who knows? Like I always say, my favorite project is my next project, and we'll see what that is. So
I love it. I should adopt that. Yeah, my favorite project, my next project.
The unintended slight is that it's not my current project.
Oh no, I was clear on that. I was very clear. Like, yeah.
It's the next one. I want to abandon this one so I can move on to the next.
I am great at starting stuff. Boy, the finishing is rough.
Yeah. I will say I'm actually really excited. One of my classes, I've reworked it entirely. and we've been just trying some new stuff. So we're doing some motion capture stuff. We're getting ready to start that. But we spent the first half of the semester doing a car chase scene in Unreal. And that turned out like so good. I was so excited about how that project turned out. So it's those little things that kind of boost you forward and be like, oh yeah, this is working. I'm enjoying this. So,
I like it. Well, hey, thank you very much for taking the time.
thank you for asking.
I appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to seeing who else is on the list you've talked to and listen to those podcasts.
Yeah. No, it's just getting started. Yeah. So you'll see. It's just interesting people, friends, family. It's just, people I want to talk to, because now's the time. Yeah. I learned that from the pandemic, right? I did what I was supposed to do. I stayed in, and it's been too long, and I've lost connection with a lot of folks. And so that's what this is for. Yeah. It's for reestablishing that connection. So
this is cool. Thanks for asking. Ask me to do it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Cool.
All right. Well, Greg Marlow, everybody, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of Fish Shells. For show notes from this episode and more information about the show, visit leetrout.com. Music production by Haroon Sarang. We'll see you next time.